Hi folks, good morning. My name is Luciana Padua. You can call me Lou. And I work with Hydra 1303. And today we're here to go over security with microservices and PKS and NSX-T. So I have a couple of things that I want to cover with you. And first, just a basic to get started with the NSX-T topology, the container network interface concept, some of the plugins that we use under the hood to make things work. And then I'll talk about the pod micro-segmentation. We'll go over some of the DFW policies. And then I'll show you a little bit of the native tools that we have for monitoring. And then talk about some of the tools that you can use to integrate in order to monitor this environment. So folks, before I even get too far started with the NSX-T topology, I just wanted to give you the framework that we have with PKS, just to put everything under perspective, to make it a little bit easier. So for that, I'm just going to do the whiteboard, just to give you the overall picture, so that everybody has an idea of what's going on, and then we can get into more details. So if you think about PKS as an architecture framework, right? So what we have is basically your underlay, and that's going to be your physical world, right? So like your switching, your spine and leaf design. On top of that, we have our vSphere, and then vSAN. And then on top of this, I'm going to have NSX-T. And all of the micro-segmentation bells and whistles that you get are due to NSX-T. So when we look at that, I have NSX-T for network plus security. And today I won't get into all the networking stuff. I'll just get into the security part. But of course, if you guys want to talk about, after the session, I'll be out there. Just come ask any questions. We can go over more discussions. And then after NSX-T is where I'm going to have basically my K8 and my pods. And then this whole thing basically is PKS. So now, in order to monitor all this, there's a couple of tools like Traceflow that are embedded with NSX-T, that comes with NSX-T. But there are other tools that you can use to monitor the environment from the vRealize family, like the networking side, the login side. Now we have log intelligence. Now we'll have Wavefront. So I'll put a couple here. So Wavefront, log intelligence, which is new, log insight, and then VRNI, and of course we also have VRA in there. So those are the tools. So this gives you a big picture, just to give you an idea of what's actually going on, right? So now that you have that, I can get into a little bit more specific, which is what we got here, which is basically our NSX-T topology with Kubernetes. So in this case, you have your namespace, you're going to have your pods, you have your nodes, and then the VMs are going to be my nodes. NSX-T is going to provide all of the routing for us. And what you're going to see is, in NSX-T, you're probably seeing different presentations. You have two tiers of routing, tier 0 and tier 1. And basically, all of the plumbing between T0 and T1 is done for us. So it makes life a lot easier. It's not that I have to go in there and start configuring, BGP and all that to make that work. And then, obviously, for visibility and monitoring, we do have the integrated tools that come with NSX-T, like Traceflow, and some of the monitoring with SpoofGuard and port mirroring and all of that that's already embedded in T. And we also have the other tools that we can integrate with this for PKS. And then IPAM is going to allow me to manage all of the IP blocks that we're going to be using on this design. Cool. So said that, guys, a couple of things just to get an understanding. We have basically what we call the container network interface. And the container network interface is what's going to provide me basically the communication between my Kubernetes and my configurations that need to be pushed, basically my plugins with NCP for NSX. So what you're probably seeing a lot out there, and actually if you saw the keynotes, you saw, oh, this magic happens, you create your QA clusters, and all of a sudden you have a logical switch and logical routing, and it's super cool, because we don't have to go there and deploy that stuff. Well, how is that possible? Based on the plugins that we have, right? That's what's going to push that network configuration for us. And when you look at the NSX T Container Plugin, so basically what you have is your NSX Manager, which is the brain of operations for NSX. So the architecture of NSX, you have your NSX Manager, which is my brain of operations, and then I will have this special plugin so I can have my APIs and my calls from NSX Manager and be able to pass that into my Kubernetes master, and then, of course, configurations that I can leverage within the cluster. So this allows me to create all of the objects in NSX with the logical routers, logical switches, and so on. So really, I won't get into all the details now, but the magic that you see happening is because of the plugins and the calls that we are actually making under the hood to make this possible. And folks, when you start looking at the container interface, network container interface, so now here you have your KA nodes. Basically, most customers are going to be doing this with VMs, right? So we're deploying the nodes as VMs. And when you look at this, pretty much, I think that what security folks are concerned now is, okay, we're doing this magic, and we have all these containers, and life is great for the developers, and we can provision to them what they need. But question number one is how I'm going to secure this environment, right? How am I going to apply policies to this environment? So just like on our previous architecture with NSX-V, NSX-T will provision DFW, right? So I will be able to do micro-segmentation and micro-segmentation policies similar to what I have before with NSX-V. The only considerations now is that there is 2 levels of policies. And I want to show to you the details on that as well, because you have policies that can be executed by your developer within the cluster, within the K8s, and then there is policies that are going to be executed by your security admin. And I think what is happening that you start looking at all the different presentations, and most of the time what we're doing is showing you the magic, because it's super cool, with what happens when the KA admins are putting the policies. But what does that really mean for us from the infrastructure side, right? And how do I leverage that and also continue to maintain control? The whole point of having all of these security policies, having PKS on-prem and having control over this environment is to avoid what? To avoid that my developer behind my back does what we've been calling shadow IT, right? I was not able to provision him with containers. Let's say my infrastructure wasn't ready. They needed to develop something. Let's just say, we are a medical center. We have Epic. They basically get a module from Epic, and they want to customize for the medical center. Well, I didn't have containers. They went behind my back, and they went, found something out there that they could develop. Well, I don't know if they have any kind of security or compliance to be using that, right? And then imagine if I get audited, and then I cannot actually, prove that, hey, I didn't know that they had gone to Amazon to do containers over there, and we're actually developing something that we are using, and then I'm off compliance. So there is regulations, HIPAA, PCI, BASIL, all the regulations. Here in the US, that's pretty big, right? Different countries will have different regulations, but here in the US, for us, this is really huge. So the benefit is I am now provisioning them with containers so they can do their thing, but on the infrastructure side of the house, I actually have control. And I need to be able to actually apply policies. So coming from the infrastructure security side of the house, I want to make sure that I'm on the compliance. So guys, as far as the policies, what do we have for micro-segmentation? And then I'll talk a little bit about how that micro-segmentation is also going to work for microservices. So as far as policies, there is 2 levels of policies. And this is what I wanted to make sure that everybody understands is I have what we call the KA network policies. That KA network policy is what my developer is going to actually use and leverage. So they're creating a YAML file, they're basically labeling and pushing a policy that is going to show up dynamically in NSX. That is one policy, and that is something that they already used to do. Okay, forget about doing this with NSX, PKS like we're doing now, today, but imagine your developer already knows when they're deving any kind of software engineering or any kind of application, they already know the ports that they want to use. There's tons of templates out there that they can use, and it has the ports, and they know, okay, my app, my DB, my back end, my front end is going to use port, 3003 or 8000 and something, and they basically have that. This network policy is that. The thing is, they're building that in our world now, and that has to be passed on to NSX T. The good news is I don't have to manually go into NSX T to configure those policies. As soon as they build, the policies are dynamically populated in NSX T. That's the internal policy between the pod, between the containers within the pod, right? That's what they are building. Now, on top of that, we also have other policies. So we can have predefined labels, and we can configure NS groups under the inventory on NSX T. So that's also what I want to point out to you. So guys, taking in consideration all that, that is handling all the east-west traffic, right? I still have to have northbound policies. So my security team is not off the hook. Yeah, I still have to go and get, obviously, my main policies that are northbound handled by, say my Palo Alto or my ASA or my checkpoint or my edge firewall, right? So that has to also be considered when we're doing this. So taking a look, first of all, just to get started so we can understand, what is happening, so I can show you a little bit of the policy from the view of my K8 admin, right? So in this scenario, guys, I'm basically starting with my namespace and creating that. So as you see, as we created Hydra 13 and Hydra 03, I basically start getting my pods in place, and I have my containers. So this is just the basic start of the actual creation of my pods with the namespace. If you're doing this with PaaS, I forgot to mention this, but the microservices and security implementation with micro-segmentation on NSX-T will be the same for PaaS or PKS. The only thing is on PaaS, instead of having the namespace, I have an organization. But it will be the same type of micro-segmentation services. Oh? And they can be very granular as well. So you can have a bulk application a group and combine all application, or you can do a per application. Cool? And that works the same on PKS or PaaS. And if you look in this design then, basically now what I have is predefined labels and rules. So guys, notice that again, this is the view from my K8 admin. So basically doing my kubectl commands and adding the labels to basically create my web and my DB. Now I have these two groups basically similar to our concept from before where I had web, app, DB, my 3-tier app. The thing is that we are making it different now is we are basically with microservices, what we are actually doing. Microservices is allowing me to split the code and function of that application into multiple pieces, right? So when I look at that, I'm going to have to think about provisioning security the same way. So if you think about basically this is the predefined labels that are going to be leveraged. So NSX can say, okay, you are web, you are app, you are DB, just like we had before. And when you look at these now, I'm creating a policy, which will be the first step. And this is, again, from the K8 admin view, right? So I still have the other side, which is the infrastructure security team view. When you look at this, you notice that they're creating the web and the app. I'm creating the policy. That's my YAML file. This is what, when they create, we're going to basically push to NSX, right? And this is what you've been seeing that is dynamically done. So most of the security folks are wondering, okay, Lou, this is freaking me out now. You're telling me that my DevOps guy is coming in and creating security policies. So this is where we got to make the difference. Guys, the security policy that they are creating here is for within the namespace and the actual pods that I have, the containers that I have inside my namespace. This is the same type of security policy that they were creating before when they were developing their applications. This is the same policy that they would say, okay, I want port 80, I want port 3003. So the application could talk to the front end, back end, database, you know, however that architecture was, even without microservices, right? So they already had that. This is the same thing for them, right? Now, for us, what does that translate into? Because this is my environment now, I want to make sure that obviously, once they push that policy, that my NSX-T sees that. This is the dynamic portion that everybody's been showing. There's two awesome things with NSX-T that in all the big presentations I saw this week is this magic sauce. Oh, I have dynamic routing, I have dynamic logical switches coming up, and I have dynamic policies. So obviously, you know, super cool. Which means as a security admin, I don't have to sit there and talk to my developer and figure out what exactly are the ports that I need to come and build rules to it, because that would be too cumbersome. Can you imagine if we had, that wouldn't be flexible, right? If I had to sit there and for every microservice that they deployed, now I have to manually create a rule in NSX, that would be a nightmare for us. So, but that's the distinction. This is the K8 admin view of basically inserting the policies for their front end, back end to talk with my containers. On top of these, guys, I have more policies. So what I want to show to you, and I'm actually working on a blog right now, and we'll be posting it probably next week. I'll let you guys know. You can get my contact and all that. But I didn't get a chance to get into the details from the infrastructure and security team view for this. So I'm going to talk about it, but then I will detail this on the blog. So then you guys can check it out, and if you have questions, you can reach out, email me, you know, and we can talk. But this is the magic sauce from the K8 admin point of view. Now, to monitor all this, what we have basically embedded tools that are in NSX-T. There is the trace flow, there's the port mirroring, there's spoof guard, syslog. This is already in NSX-T. Well, besides that, what else are we going to use to monitor? That's my log intelligence, my wavefront, and my VRNI. So the tools that we already had for monitoring are going to basically integrate with this, so I can get greater capability and visibility on this environment. With trace flow, we already have trace flow. Trace flow has been embedded in NSX since the V, you know, now on the T, the same way. This gives me the ability to see the path from point A to point B, right? The whole goal of trace flow is when I look, I want to see, okay, from this container, from this service to this other container, this other service. From this application, from this service to another front end or back end. When you look at trace flow, I can see if, hey, something broke because there was a wrong part, there is a firewall rule or something that is not working properly. This is a really cool tool embedded in NSX-T. Now, all of these, guys, again, is the view from the policy that was dynamically created. Let me just back up for 1 second. This is the policy that is dynamic created because I pushed that YAML policy file. Not me, the K8 admin, my developer, right? He pushed that K8 file. That policy, that YAML policy, creates this on NSX for me. Now, on top of these, there is another policy that we create, which is the part that I want to talk about, and then I'll detail more when I get to finishing the blog for you guys. So my security folks are now thinking, okay, wait, this is a policy that my developer pushed. How am I going to control my developers in this environment? So guys, if you go down on the, if you come down here on the inventory, if you go down to the inventory, you'll be able to see that you can create what we call NS groups. The NS groups is what my security team is looking for. With NS groups, I can use IP sets, MAC sets, IP addresses, applications. I can do the group per application. I can do per service. So you can get very granular and then control basically a top-level security policy, right? So my developer has the control of what goes on between the containers, so their app is going to work. They develop all the software, they're engineering all the goods in there. They need ports so they can communicate, front end, back end. That's over their control. I'm going to come in as a security admin and put an overall policy on top of this. That overall policy is the same concept that we had before with NSX-V, where I'm creating security groups and security policies, except that here I'm going under the inventory, creating the NS group, and then adding tags and things like that onto that NS group, and then applying a larger control policy over that. So then I can prevent pods from talking to each other. Then I can start having more control. Now you're probably wondering, you know, in this environment we have TraceFlow, we have a couple of tools that help us monitor and analyze. When it comes down on the end, you can say, you know what, I have now this whole new environment, and I want to make sure that, you know, maybe my developers are doing prototyping, that they're creating something we're not bringing into production right away. We can create test and dev bubble as well the same way. I can do a namespace Hydra, I can do a namespace Hydra test. And then with the overall policy that I was telling you, you can control the communication in between the pods. You can control the communication in between the logical switch. So then I can get the level of isolation to say, okay, my guys want a sandbox, they want to play, I'm going to put them on the sandbox logical switch, that's the play time. Now application is ready to go, we go in production, we have all of the actual security rules in place from the overall point. And they already have all of the dynamic security rules that they need to have for the application to actually work. So two different things here that I wanted to point out for you guys, because I think that as we get into this new world and have all of these new pieces that are moving around, you know, how do I make sure that this is under compliance? Again, that I have all my regulations tied up. So I think that when you look at this, my policies that my developer is doing is inside basically the policies with the containers and the pod. And then my overall policies that I create with the NS groups in NSX is what's taking care of in between. And then I also have my northbound, southbound policies, right? In and out of the environment. We're not taking that out. You still have to have these guys. Is micro-segmentation for microservices. To me, coming from the infrastructure and security side, it does not matter what you have in here. I don't care what, you know, my folks are running inside, as long as I can have that visibility. I gain the visibility, I can make the overall security posture for my enterprise. It doesn't matter if the service is split, it doesn't matter if it's together. Honestly, on the end of the day, from the security point of view for our teams, as long as I can apply micro-segmentation, it works. If you look under the hood with NSX-T, the behavior inside the hypervisor is very similar to what we had with NSX-V. You're still going to have the processes for DFW that have to be executed. So I can still maintain the same control. And the only thing is now, instead of having, one app, one VM, one application running all the code inside like we had before, we have that split into containers. They are still objects as far as we are concerned on the security side of the house, right? So I think that gives you a lot of flexibility on the design, allows me to create a sandbox for my developers, allow them to basically have what ports they need to make their application work, and also allow me to maintain the posture, the security posture for my enterprise. So if I get audited, there is any kind of, like I said, now I can tell my developer, he can come in and basically, you want to work on some module of Epic, so you can customize that. You don't have to go behind my back, find some provider that's going to give you containers so you can try to make that work and then bring it back in-house. Also, guys, another thing that I didn't touch here is with PKS, I didn't mention over here, we actually have basically secure container registry, which is Harbor. And this is also part of my security posture, because now I have control over the files in the registry. I have control of what they're actually using, versions and everything else. So this is under my security enterprise control. So when they keep saying, this is Kubernetes for enterprise grade, what does that really mean? I'm giving the enterprise and the security team the control over the registry, over the files that they can pull down, that they can use. That way I have, really a way to get to what security team always wants, which is my trust zero environment, right? And basically have the policies that can actually apply to this environment. So I have the secure container registry, which is my Harbor. I have the microseg rules with NSX-T, and the microseg rules will be applied to microservices. Either you can do a more, they say like a course, more a broad policy, or you can do per application, per service, a more granular approach. Cool. All of that, guys, configurable there with NSX-T. The dynamic part is the interpod and the, intercontainer, and then the rest is still customized by me as a security admin. Cool. So, folks, if you need anything else that we can help you with, this is really 30 minutes is not enough for security. We could spend 3 days on this, so this is a very brief for you. But if you need anything, this blog is from what we have today. I'm going to create another one that explains the details on how to go into inventory and create the security overall policy for you. And then you'll be seeing that. And if you feel like you want to reach out, you can come talk to us. We'll be on the back there. And also can send an email. And I hope everybody has a great rest of the day here and enjoy the conference. Thank you.